It's great. It's sophisticated. It's something that we've never ever seen. Let's just apply it to the processes. Let's make it available to our people. Let's actually start using it. Nothing actually gets returned. Why? Because the systems, the culture, the processes, the workflows, and the way that we go about interacting in the daily course of life are not built around AI. If we want to see return, we have to take a step back and reimagine. And frankly, here's one of the challenges that I would kind of put out there. We talk about return on investment and focus on that R. Rather than talking about return, the first R that we should be talking about, reimagination. We have to reimagine what work would look like. How should work be redistributed between a human workforce and an intelligent workforce? And as you do that, it will ultimately lead to R. So that R of return is probably the third R after reimagining.
I'm Ryan Heath, and welcome to the AI Leadership Lab, where I interview C-suite leaders about their AI journeys. We cover what's working, where they're getting stuck, how they pivot, and the lessons they take from the losses. Joining us now on AI Leadership Lab is Nitin Mittal, who is the Global AI Leader for Deloitte. Welcome to the podcast, Nitin.
Likewise, thank you very much for introducing me, and I'm very excited to be on.
Excellent. Now, you sit at the intersection between AI strategy, large-scale transformation, board decision-making, and so that's a very different beast to merely developing AI foundation models. Can you give us an insight to sort of where that means you see Deloitte sitting within the AI ecosystem, and how is that different from, say, an OpenAI or one of those model providers?
Yeah, absolutely. To be kind of very frank, we are the appliers of AI. We essentially go and apply in enterprises with a focus on creating impact. We're not scientists. We are not the original developers of the models, but what we do is put them to use. Put them to use in enterprises for business, for the purposes of actually generating value, which we can talk about and where that value is. But that's our role in the ecosystem. It's at the end of the scientific development chain so that you can do something with it, you can progress with it, you can monetize it, you can commercialize it, and you can actually impact businesses, society at large, and all the employees within those businesses, but also people with whom we interact every day.
Wonderful. Now, it's always been my view that most of the value that will be generated from AI is going to come from the application layer that you're in, which is not to say that OpenAI can't be a big, successful business. It can. But now that we have these commoditized, open-source models, like everyone can basically get access to a decent model. But that doesn't mean that the AI you're using or buying will work with your own workflow or that you can nail down the organizational design challenges. So maybe can you tell us what's your sort of view on the biggest misconception about where value is going to be created in this AI revolution?
Yeah, this is a hot topic right now. And I think if anyone follows the news around all the investment and capital that's going into AI right now, there's a lot of I with little r. So where does that R actually come from? And therein lies perhaps one of the biggest or greatest misconceptions that we actually see, which is it's great, it's sophisticated, it's something that we've never ever seen. Let's just apply it to the processes. Let's make it available to our people. Let's actually start using it. Nothing actually gets returned. Why? Because the systems, the culture, the processes, the workflows, and the way that we go about interacting in the daily course of life are not built around AI. If we want to see return, we have to take a step back and reimagine. And frankly, here's one of the challenges that I would kind of put out there. We talk about return on investment and focus on that R. Rather than talking about return, the first R that we should be talking about, reimagination. We have to reimagine what work would look like. How should work be redistributed between a human workforce and an intelligent workforce? And as you do that, it will ultimately lead to R. So that R of return is probably the third R after reimagining, redistributing the work amongst a human and a digital workforce to get to the actual return on investment.
I want to pick up on the we mention there, because obviously that is more than I. So it's more than the CEO. But then sometimes I feel like leaders are racing ahead of the rest of the we on how we use AI and apply AI. How do you see that change unfolding? Do we need to start involving more people throughout the workforce, for example, so that you get to the right reimagination? Or is it enough to just have the executive team deciding what the strategy is?
I was very conscious in actually saying we, and there was a reason for it. CEOs, boards, executives, government, let's say kind of entities, as well as prominent leaders around the world, as well as many of the discussions that have been taking place this particular kind of week, have inspired. They have set a vision. They have articulated in terms of what their thinking is. But they are not the ones who are actually going to be able to reimagine, redistribute, and ultimately get to R. The we is all of us. The we is everyone using it in the daily course of life, and essentially what you do at work and how you use it just becomes an afterthought, the same way the internet and a smartphone has become.
Indeed. And that brings us very neatly to your book, All In on AI. I think that book pretty neatly captured the C-suite obsession with AI. If you were doing a second edition this month or next month, what would you be adding that would sort of tell organizations how to differentiate themselves and sort of get ahead of the pack in 2026?
With AI, unlike any other technology that we have actually kind of invented in the past, it thinks. Most technologies have essentially been a substitute for human muscle power, like the steam engine, or every system that we have, quote unquote, computerized has been about codification of information. AI is not about codification of information alone. It essentially takes on the attributes of a human being, and particularly the cognitive attributes of a human being. It thinks, it reasons, and very likely could end up even judging like ourselves. When you have something of that nature, it is not just an incremental progress in technology, it is a structural shift in society and frankly in every form of business. What's happening is with that ability to think and reason, it is giving advent to a digital workforce. That digital workforce is starting to generate abundant intelligence. Organizations of the future who are likely going to thrive perhaps need to focus less on the sophistication of that intelligence. They need to focus more on the shape of that intelligence. And what I mean by the shape of the intelligence is every single organization may have to have their own intelligence signature. That intelligence signature would be, how do you actually progress along 6 dimensions? The dimensions of scope, service, sustainability, security, scale, and speed. And the way organizations proceed along those 6 particular dimensions will define the shape of that intelligent signature.
So it's almost the policy handbook or the manifesto for your enterprise AI along those 6
Exactly.
lines. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, you've sort of said that you're skeptical of the idea that AI will take that many jobs outright, but very clearly it is changing the shape of jobs, and those who are integrating it well or are at the forefront of it stand to be at a serious advantage. I think that's sort of fair to say. How are you seeing that play out with some of your clients and prospective clients? Like, what's it like on the ground and in those offices?
Yeah, and you're right. I've actually spoken about this very explicitly and very passionately in many different public forums. I personally and passionately believe that the fear of job impact and job losses is overblown. In fact, it is hard to find many kind of fields out there where AI has truly replaced jobs at scale. Rather, what is happening is another human being who actually has become proficient in the usage of AI is more likely to replace you. We need to be fearing that other human being who has become proficient in the usage of AI than fearing AI kind of taking our jobs by ourselves. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should just kind of ignore this particular challenge. The word that you used is perhaps the most important. The nature and shape of jobs could be changing, which means we have to adapt and our skill sets have to change. That is what the focus needs to be. Even when we kind of talk about the progress from a software engineering and a coding perspective and the fact that more and more lines of code are going to be written by algorithms as opposed to kind of a human being, that doesn't necessarily mean software engineering as a discipline is dead. Who's developing those algorithms? How are those algorithms being, let's say, verified, validated, trust being built in the system so that there are the appropriate guardrails, and we know that the algorithms are benefiting society as a whole as opposed to kind of being a detrimental force. Some human is doing that. The shape is changing.
And if we take that point of the humans using AI, putting the humans who don't use it at risk, do you see geographic differences there? You know, I notice very much as an Australian living in the United States that the US just talks about AI a lot more. To some extent, they may use AI a lot more. And then I wonder if that's going to put US-based companies sort of ahead, effectively, as others who have sort of like decided it's a bit of hype or kept their head buried in the sand, they're more at risk in these other geographies of being the ones who don't use AI and therefore being replaced or outcompeted in some way.
So one of my sort of learnings in the past 6 months in particular, and specifically both as it relates to the work that we do with many enterprises and our clients, but also kind of the book that I've been working towards. We had the, and in this case, my co-author and myself, we had the privilege of actually interviewing more than 30 executives as well as government officials around the world. And this is like more than a dozen countries around the world, as well as close to about 30, 35 enterprises around the world. And what we actually surprisingly found is that there is a perception that a lot of the progress or most of the progress is being made in a handful of countries. That may not necessarily be true. When you actually go into how a mining company in Brazil is actually using AI, how a bank in Australia is progressing, how a metro system in a city in India is applying AI, how a container company in China is actually thinking of AI and proceeding, and how a traditional insurance company in Spain is trying to change the game through the application of AI, it is a learning lesson in terms of everyone starting to realize the potential and the promise and turning potential and promise into performance, except for the fact that they're not doing big bang. They're trying to start small. They're trying to focus on a process. They're trying to focus on a particular need and going and scaling up AI and its application for that particular process, that particular function, that particular kind of area.
Now, I want to sort of turn into the big hype discussion around agents a little bit now. So you have a theory around what amplified intelligence is. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you see that and the role of agents being integrated into decision-making processes? You know, because the context is, the debate is, some people want humans in the loop always. They're nervous around the idea of agents just being allowed to take decisions and actions.
It is very, very likely, and I would say inevitable, that we are going to have both humans in the loop and also the concept of humans on the loop. There's a difference between the two.
Tell us.
Humans in the loop is where agents execute, humans decide. Humans on the loop is agents execute and decide. Humans verify and determine what to do with the outliers or anomalies. You're going to have both.
So they're kind of the auditors in this process rather than the decision makers.
That is correct. Now, why do I kind of say that? When you start thinking about redistribution of work after you have reimagined it, the high cognitive related functions are inevitably going to be undertaken by humans, specifically where you need to bring intuition, creativity, and judgment to bear. The high throughput related work, whether it is repeatable, whether it is administrative, whether it is something that we typically tend to kind of find mundane, are all going to be done by agents. And in the course of undertaking and executing even the mundane, they're going to be making micro decisions. So the key is not whether humans are going to be in the loop or not. Yes, they are, but if work is redistributed in an appropriate manner, there will be circumstances where you have to have humans in the loop, and there will be other circumstances where you need to have the concept of humans on the loop.
And as we get more humans on the loop, what are some of the more purely human qualities? I think you mentioned some there, like intuition and creativity. What are those sort of qualities or skills that you would recommend to anyone listening to the podcast to say, like, you've got to hone in on that and you've really got to emphasize that over the next couple of years to keep your own career bubbling along?
Yeah. One of the skill sets that I think we all have to learn and embrace, and this is not necessarily about a hard skill set and nothing to do with STEM or computer science or anything. One of the skill sets is management of a diverse workforce and diverse peers. Except the definition of diversity is both organic and inorganic in this case. Both a human and a digital workforce. We're going to have peers, we're going to have employees, and we are going to inevitably have co-workers that are silica-based, aka a digital workforce. And it is not inconceivable anymore, wherein a manager of today who perhaps has 50 employees reporting up to him or her could actually have 10 employees, but 1,000 digital workers. And it is also likely a day will come when a human employee is reporting up to a digital boss. So the management of a diverse workforce.
That'll be a fun performance review. A weekly one-to-one with the agent. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, but you're absolutely right. That's a skill set that we have to learn, which perhaps is an underappreciated fact and maybe sort of an underappreciated aspect of what is actually transpiring. The management of both a human and a digital workforce, the interactions across those two types of workforces, and the fact that we are going to have both human as well as digital co-workers, and we have to live in an era where abundant intelligence is being created, except not all intelligence may be the prerogative of a human being.
If we think a bit about the organizational design challenges now, like it's not hard to access the top models or to sort of have a suite of models to choose from as you build things. And that seems to mean that the difference between success and failure on an AI project is going to be around the governance and the change management aspects a lot of the time. Luckily, this is what Deloitte specializes in. What are sort of some of the things that you've seen as critical to success in recent projects? Like what's been the difference between a success and a pilot project that just stalled out?
Yes. One of the biggest critical success factors is don't just talk about governance and change management. To actually make a change, you have to take governance and you have to codify it in the algorithms and the models, whether LLMs or SLMs, as guardrails. When you talk about change, it's not about just change management in the context of how we are reskilling and the change management in the context of redistribution of work. It's also change management in terms of how are the processes going to be reimagined? What needs to be done so that the system of how work is actually performed is changed? What does work even mean And how is that being redistributed between a human and a digital workforce?
And how
That's
fluid
what
is that? Because when I think about the sort of original or the sort of iconic change management theories, it treats change management as this project or a thing that you outsource to a company like Deloitte to deliver for you. And it's sort of like it starts on one day and it ends on a certain date. And I get the sense that AI is just continuous and that you don't get to have an off button on the change project anymore.
No, it's a continuous process. In fact, I would say that even the theories of change management are going to evolve and may be outdated. It actually may be continuous management, not change management anymore.
Yeah, there we go. Excellent. Now, one question I always like to ask my guests is to describe a situation or a project or an idea, whatever it is, something you've chosen not to do. Because it's easy to say you want to do a lot of things, but it's harder to say no.
First thing, stop experimenting and no more proof of concepts, no more POCs. There's millions and millions who've already done that have been kind of undertaken and already been done by enterprises, by individuals, by students, by governments. There's a lot that has already been experimented on. Most of what is out there is already kind of proven at this point.
Okay.
Rather, focus on how do I apply at scale, with speed, with the necessary kind of security, so that it is sustainable and it is done in a manner that I can service my customers with the greatest particular scope that I can undertake as a business.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that I think has really powered this sort of generative AI revolution is that it has a capacity to wow people and you get excited by something. And then there's a danger in that because then you over-rotate on the magic trick and you don't think about how it's going to work in your workplace. But it's still good to be excited by AI. What's sort of some of the most exciting uses or something that you're most excited to finally be able to achieve sort of in the coming year with AI?
Yeah. What's actually happening is an inflection point right now. We can talk about a lot of the use cases as it relates to the back office of enterprises. We can talk about all the enterprise functions. We can talk about all the business workflows, etc. But the inflection point that is actually kind of taking place is that the new use cases that are starting to emerge where some of the more sophisticated LLMs are being applied actually impact us in our daily life. We're kind of progressing to a point where the way that drug discovery and the way clinical trials are undertaken is undergoing a radical shift. We're getting to
and we'll see and the difference there being we haven't seen the results yet because the drugs take so long to get to market typically, but we're going to start getting them to market.
That's correct.
Yep.
The way that we even think and plan for travel, as an example, or personal tasks, or how we want to get information, or if you happen to be a teenager, perhaps they will also say the way that they undertake dating or think about dating is actually starting to impact us at a personal level.
Yep.
That's kind of where the magic is happening, where AI is now no longer just in the hands of the scientific community and being talked about visionary leaders or being basically kind of discussed in boardrooms. It is something that we can sense, we can touch, we can feel, and we can talk to in our daily lives.
Yep, that is exciting. Now, given you interact with so many people around the world, and I'm thinking sort of the CEOs, the ministers, the departmental officials that you're dealing with. What is there any sort of pattern? Are there any trends across the ones that do best on AI? What do they do differently versus the ones where you walk into a room and think, oh God, this is going to be an effort to convince them. They haven't done their homework.
Yeah. The ones who actually noticeably do something kind of differently is instead of just kind of unleashing AI in their environment and assuming kind of 1,000 flowers kind of blooming, they're now actually going about it in a much more controlled manner, but with two key objectives.
Yep.
Number one, achieving scale. And number two is how do I get to that third R that I was kind of mentioning.
Yep.
That is actually now becoming paramount in terms of where success is being shown, as opposed to, let's just make it available. Let's see what happens. Let's continue with experiments. Let's undertake 100 proof of concepts and let's get 10, 15, 20, 30% productivity improvement. That will naturally kind of happen. It happens with every technological evolution. But the ultimate way of actually kind of seeing the third R and achieving it and getting to the performance of AI is not necessarily just by letting 1,000 flowers bloom, but by deciding which process, which area, which aspect of my company am I really going to reimagine, transform, restructure, and rethink how work is going to get redistributed.
There we go. It comes back to that prioritization again. And actually brings us to my final question, which is for anyone listening who wants to step up and become an AI leader within their company, aside from learning how to prioritize, what are the suggestions that you'd have for them this year about what can help them stand out and actually be the person that seizes that mantle and delivers all the R's to their organization?
Yeah. The ones I think who will shine are, instead of focusing on streamlining, focus on reimagining. Instead of essentially marveling at the sophistication of AI, start applying it at scale. And instead of talking about what could it do to my workers, start thinking about what work even means in the first place. Those who actually show the courage to take a step back and do that, those who actually focus on it as opposed to just kind of marveling at the scientific progress on AI, and those who actually go ahead and show the fortitude to execute against it are the ones that are probably going to shine and stand out as leaders.
There you go. Nitin Mittal, thank you for having the courage of coming on AI Leadership Lab. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
But we're not done yet. We got time for your questions, if you would like to ask Nitin your questions. We got microphones. We've got one here. Excellent. I love the enthusiasm.
Mittal, thank you for expressing this concept of reimagining a process. I understand that we need to reimagine how the machine works together with the human, but another thing that we need to reimagine is also how to govern this new process and how to weigh against the expected benefits of this new process, the risk and the cost to implement controls and guardrails and all those measures that ensure that AI is conform to our values and our objectives. It's something that Deloitte, actually it is because I wrote together with Deloitte a white paper on it, is actually Deloitte pursuing that with the client to start to quantify both the benefit side of applying AI to a process and the cost side due to risk materialization and implementation of controls.
Yeah. Reimagination is not something that can just be done in a unbridled manner with absolutely no guardrails and completely unfettered. It has to be done with the appropriate governance. It has to be done as part of a control set, and it has to be done in a manner wherein we're respectful of our values, but it also starts essentially challenging some of the norms that we may have had or some of the biases that actually we may have had as humans. We talk about biases in kind of models. What we never question at times is the explicit or even the subconscious biases that humans actually have. So all those have to be taken into account. Reimagination can't just be in terms of let's upend everything. It has to be done in a governed, controlled, and manageable manner, given everything that you kind of articulated.
Samsa up the back there. Oh, and then the gentleman at the front. Yeah, you first, Samsa.
Okay. So thank you for a very interesting discussion. I wanted to ask you the complement to that question. So how do we, because you talked about how do we redesign, reimagine processes with AI, but then how do we redesign, reimagine the human complement to those? Because the human and the human AI interface, because the human complement we cannot simply take 5 tasks and give 3 to AI, because that may not be functional from an AI perspective at all. And then the remaining 2 may not be very functional from a human perspective. So how do we redesign? What does the future of human organization look like?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So I'll kind of maybe give this example in the context of this specific question. Take the world of physical AI right now, right? In a sense, physical AI is instead of agents and quote unquote a digital worker in a server that we can then interact through a computer or a phone, a smartphone, etc. You have an agent and a digital worker in a metallic, let's say, encasement, and that happens to be a physical AI device. Now, we talk about bipedal humanoid robots in a factory floor. The question is, why is it bipedal? Is bipedal humanoid robot the most efficient form of mechanics? And is it something that leads to better automation or better energy conservation? Or does it kind of lead to better efficiency with respect to what work that robot has to perform? The only reason it is bipedal because the physical environment that we work in, such as the factory floor, is designed for another bipedal organism called the Homo sapien race. So we have literally recreated ourselves for the environment that we happen to kind of live in and call that a bipedal humanoid robot. The most efficient form of a robot may actually be either a drone or an AMR, which is an autonomous mobility kind of vehicle with wheels. That may be more efficient than essentially something that is kind of bipedal. So we have to reimagine the environment that we actually work in. And we have to show the courage that that environment may not necessarily be where we just fit AI into how we have created the physical space for ourselves. We may need to rethink that physical space itself and find our space and our role in that particular environment. Now, what is the answer to it? I'm not sure that any one of us have the crystal ball to kind of know it, but we have to at least show the fortitude to go in that direction.
Thank you. I was actually downstairs listening. You start talking about change management and moving from like programmatic change management. And I'm a big believer in dealing with change should be a corporate capability. So I guess the question is, how do you feel that we can leverage AI to sort of harness the understanding of change resistance so that we can turn it into a piece of data analytics that we can then understand and actually move the needle in major business transformations, because it seems to be human adoption and sort of the mindset shifting and behavioral change that actually stop major transformations from being, on time and on budget.
Yeah. One of the biggest reasons for resistance to change is because we, whether in our daily lives or even as employees in a company, feel that this thing is either annoying or it's not adding value, or it's adding to kind of the work that I have to undertake, or it's changing what I'm used to and what has become muscle memory for me. If we just throw AI to the way work is performed, there will be resistance. If we rethink, what is that person actually doing? Why is that person doing it? Does the person need to do it? If the person needs to do it, what should they actually be doing? Then there would be a lot more adoption as opposed to resistance. You have to take the annoying factor out and make it comfortable. You have to take the additive tasks that human being has to do and make it a subtractive exercise where the work and the task that they're undertaking is subtracted from what they were used to do. And you have to take essentially the muscle memory out to some form of excitement and creativity where they feel that instead of just exercising my muscle memory, I'm actually exercising my cognitive memory. So we have to redesign. And that was the whole point around reimagination. Without it, you will have actually resistance to change, as opposed to what we were saying, which is continuous improvement and continuous management.
And how hopeful are you? I'm just thinking now, as in, I'd love to work less. But if I'm working in a large organization, I imagine that organization will not want me to work less. They'll just want to get more out of my 40, 50, whatever hours a week. Is there a world where you can see organizations being happy with someone putting in 32 hours a week and that counts as a full week, for example?
So maybe let's challenge one notion. I could be wrong, but let's challenge it. do you truly actually want to just work less, or you want to do something different, work differently, work in a different area, work in a different field, work creatively?
Personally, I'd like a 3-day weekend.
Right?
Yeah. So that doesn't mean I wouldn't work very hard during the week, but I love the idea of, skiing on Friday. So that would be my goal.
It is very likely that with the progression of time, the value is going to be on the output of what that actual employee or worker generates, and not the time that they put in. Today, work by many organizations is defined on input.
Yeah.
Labor as an input. As long as we view work from the lens of an input, we will have essentially those challenges. If the definition of work revolves around output, not input, and that is the measure of work, things change, and no company will basically kind of, let's say, care that much whether you generate the output in 3 days, 4 days, or 7 days.
Okay, I'll stop hogging the microphone. Any more questions? Yeah, anyone who hasn't asked a question, and then we'll return for round 2s? Yes, gentleman here in the blue jacket.
Thank you. You've talked a lot today about like deploying agentic AI and the solutions focused on use cases. What I see a lot of the time, especially in the enterprise world, right, is they have the excitement around being able to deploy and to build and have application layers. But 85% of the time, the data is not aggregated, it's not consolidated, it's not in a golden standard that allows you to deploy and automate and use AI in the way that people want to. So how have you seen that in the world in which you're working in, and how have you helped companies rethink the data approach to allow them to go on to deploy AI in the space that they want to?
Yeah. There's been a lot of lessons for us. And, obviously we have very, very large businesses around all the data management, data integration, data governance work that we do. And the approach had always been start with the data, integrate the data, clean the data, manage the data, govern the data, and move forward. What we have been learning and what is actually starting to prove out more successful, don't work forward, work backward. First, actually kind of think through where and how do you actually want to apply AI and for what purpose, and based on how work is being redistributed. Given the way that work is going to be redistributed, break it down into the tasks that have to be performed. What tasks are being performed by a human workforce versus a digital workforce? For the tasks that are being performed by the digital workforce, what models, what agentic systems are being applied? And for those models and agentic systems that are being applied, what is the actual curated data set you need? Go and focus on cleaning that data set. Work backwards, not forward. That's been one of the biggest lessons learned.
Back to the front row. No apologies. It's great.
So I had another question because a few months back I had the pleasure to see the Solarius based in Deloitte, Italy. And I understand you create an orchestrating layer that manages different agents, and every employee has the possibility to reinvent the process through agentic AI and propose the creation of an agent, of course, in a controlled environment with given governance rule, with a consolidated knowledge base. I was just curious to know how this is going. Do you see a lot of participation? And is this the way forward to ensure participation of the workforce and not resistance to it? And on top of that, how do you ensure there's enough knowledge and awareness for employees to be able to create these agents?
Probably two parts to that question. One related to kind of orchestration. Today, we talk about orchestration of agents, having kind of a platform where you're not only building agents, but you're also kind of orchestrating the agents. What we actually forget is orchestration of the human workforce. It may not necessarily be about building orchestration for the agents that represent digital workers. We may actually have to rethink what orchestration even means. Orchestration that allows for optimal coupling of a human and a digital workforce. where you are actually orchestrating between the work that is performed by a human workforce and the tasks that are executed with a digital workforce. So the definition of orchestration by itself has to kind of change. Now, the second part of that question, we talk a lot about AI fluency, AI awareness. We're at a stage where we need to move beyond AI fluency and AI awareness. You can actually prompt your way to AI fluency, to be honest, at this point. We need to essentially talk about AI reskilling. Reskilling, what we do, how we do, where are we applying AI, how are we using AI, how are we thinking of it, and what are we doing with it? That essentially has to be part of how we are kind of reskilled. So this is not about essentially kind of reskilling in some other technology. It's not about reskilling with some other hard skill sets. It's not just kind of about reskilling for another job per se. Any job that we were performing would include AI. So it's reskilling around the usage, the awareness, the application, and the ability to even be creative by building your own agents. It is not inconceivable that in a few years, many of us could literally be creating agents in 5 minutes or less for our own personal usage.
That's something to look forward to. Have we got any more questions, or are we? Yes, one more up the back, and then I think we might be sliding into the reception territory, which is good news.
So now that you mentioned reskilling, I wanted to ask, both at Deloitte and at the customer companies, how does this change the profiles or the skill sets of the employees that they're recruiting, the entry level? What is Deloitte looking for from new graduates? Is that changing, and how?
Yeah. I'll channel our own global CEO who actually spoke about this at the Dome, where we've got another event that we have been working throughout the course of the day with Imagination in Action. And our global CEO, Joe Ukuzaglu, talked about the value of essentially being an adaptable generalist. What does that actually kind of mean? Generalist as a skill is still very relevant, still very pertinent, but they need to be able to adapt. They need to be able to essentially pivot, and they need to be able to continuously learning. Many times what happens is that you have a generalist, they come in, they do a lot of activities, they get exposure, but the learning perhaps doesn't improve. The learning doesn't continue. The ability to pivot, the ability to actually kind of apply themselves in a new area, and the ability to use AI in different forms and functions is perhaps not necessarily kind of looked upon. If we are adaptable generalists, we have a better shot, and we have a better, we will have a better ability to not only be able to perform, but thrive, be able to thrive. You have to continuously learn. You have to have the courage to pivot. You have to be reskilling, in my view, every single year. And you have to be able to use AI in different forms and functions, both the way that you perform your job, but also in the daily course of your own personal life.
Thanks for listening. 2 things before you go. First, if you'd like to appear on the show or know someone I should have on, you can find me through ryanheathconsulting.com. Finally, please tell a friend or colleague about AI Leadership Lab. Even better, leave a short 5-star rating or review on whatever platform you found this podcast. It'll help us reach more of the people who'd enjoy these tips and tricks. Thanks, and talk soon.